Good evening. Welcome to the Usha Research Institute. Today we're going to take time out to clarify much of the misconceptions and misunderstanding about healing and nutrition. The Usha Research Institute has selected Dr. Sebi, your brother and servant, to come and deliver this message, because there seems to be a little bit of problem with many of us that are looking for health and nutrition. We have visited many philosophies. We have visited the Ayurvedic, the yin-yang, the macrobiotic, the allopathic, and the homeopathic. It seems as though we are running around in circles. So we took time out to clarify that which has been made difficult to understand or complex. Today, our talk, our lecture, and this particular segment is called The Reconnection. Reconnection to what? The reconnection to life. It has now been 400 years since society has been introducing a particular method of healing that have yet to complement us in a way that we would like for it to afford us. But as we all know, that everything begins and ends with God, the Creator. So one could easily see or understand that if God is the creator of the universe, then it behooves us to understand those things that are made by God. That seemed to be some difficulty for many, because when we believe that the milk of a cow, an animal, is sufficient to afford nutrition to a human body, then one has to question that, because I am not an animal. That's common sense, I think. Animals produces milk for animal babies. Human beings, women, females, produces milk for human babies. But something happened to us that we elect to do just the opposite. Instead of us giving our babies the milk of a female human, we elect and chose to give our children the milk of an animal. I think that if we are to be scientific, intelligent, and lowest on the strata, to use our common sense, is there something wrong with that? And then, to compound the problem, is that the animal that we selected to afford us this milk is an animal that was made through the process of hybridization, an animal that is godless. God did not make a cow. You see why we are titling this subject as The Reconnection? How many of you sitting in the audience understood that or knew that? Well, I suspect that many of you doesn't. Why? Because in 1985, which is approximately 17 years ago, the Usher Research Institute took a position and showed the public of New York on WLI that carrots are artificial. Because they are artificial, they are unable to deliver the nutrition that one is looking for, because it is hybrid. You see, to understand nutrition, one has to use only those substances that are electrical. And the only substance on this planet that are electrical are the products that came with creation. Carrots didn't. Beets, rice, beans, wheatgrass, wheat. All these things are hybrid, plus much more. So what we are noticing is that there is gross misinformation when it relates to healing and nutrition. Because if in 1985 we didn't know that carrots was artificial, what else exists that we are unaware of? Well, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, there's much more. The reconnection does not allow for inconsistencies to prevail. For instance, if one is cosmically connected, meaning connected to the dictates of God Almighty, the Creator, one would never allow oneself to indulge in something other than those things that are of creation and Creator. You see, the things that God created, from the milk of a bison to the honey of a bee to the substance of a burdock plant and the kalawala, which is one of the most powerful plants in the world. These plants are electrical, opposed to comfrey, opposed to aloe vera, ginseng, rose hips, and vitamins. You see, the difference is one is electrical, one is non-electrical. And the non-electrical contains what? Starch as a base. So you see, in the reconnection, we find that we begin to clarify much of the inconsistencies. We go into this little other part that is most unnecessary. In the year of 1985, the Usher Research Institute placed an ad in the Village Voice, the Amsterdam News, and the New York Post that AIDS has been cured by the Usher Research Institute. And we specialize in cures for sickle cell, lupus, herpes, blindness, cancer, insanity, impotence, and others. When the Attorney General saw this ad, he could not, under any circumstances, accept that this ad was representing something that was accomplished. According to him, this could not be true. But what the Attorney General of New York didn't know about those of us who are members of the Usher Research Institute is that we were aware that until that day of September of 1985, we were aware that until that date, September of 1985, there's no record. There are no records showing that someone somewhere on this planet had cured these diseases that before mentioned. So how could the Attorney General, Mr. Robert Abrams of New York, could have believed that this was possible? Now, it became a thing of confrontation, which was unnecessary. We said that this is the reconnection. But in the reconnection, we find carbon that we have yet to understand or to study carbon. We are told that melanin is what makes pigmentation the color that it is. We have been fed melanin like we have been fed protein, like we have been fed vitamins and enzymes. These are words that we have yet to dissect and to understand the meaning and their function. Well, in the reconnection, we find that carbon is the determining factor in reference to life. The higher the concentration of carbon, the higher the quality of life. When carbon is absent, life is also absent. Biochemistry supports our position. Biochemistry shows that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, three combined, has to be present for life to exist. But instead of us learning about the function of carbon and iron, we've been fed vitamins, protein, enzymes, and melanin. But when the question is asked about these particular substances, that is very important. One of the most important questions that should be asked, are they electrical? People seem to think that this question should not have been asked, shouldn't have been asked. Is it electrical? Well, science shows us that that question should be asked. Why? Because the human body is electrical. And any substance that would assimilate and render the good or nutrition that we are searching and pursuing, that substance must necessarily be electrical. And then, if it is electrical, it will have a definite amount of electrons per atom, separating one element or mineral from the other. You see, in nature, everything lives by its own kind, with its own kind. Remember, we talk about chemical affinity. So when we reconnect, we find that carbon is the determining factor. So this talk is the carbon papers. Science shows that without carbon, life is very, very poor or non-existent. And this is where the compounds of the Usha Research Institute comes into play. We carefully selected from the forest plants that are the highest in electrical vibration. And ladies and gentlemen, we said that God begins and ends with everything. This forced us and compels us to go to the Holy Bible. The Holy Bible teaches us in the book of Genesis that the herbs are for the healing of the nations. The book of Ezekiel 47:12 repeats the herbs are for the healing of the nations. We again go to the last book in the Holy Bible. The herbs are for the healing of the nations. So, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, God shows us in the first book, in the middle book, and in the last book, just in case that we overlook one, we will get it in the other. And if we miss the other, we get it in the last. So shouldn't the question be asked, are we willingly neglecting God and disobeying the mandate of God? Are we doing that willfully, knowing that this is one of the greatest violations? We talk about being obedient. Of course. It is obedience that gets us the things from the Almighty that we so desire. But how many of us are obedient to that dictate? Very few of us. I hope that I'm one of them. It says in the Bible that the herbs are for the healing of the nations. Should we go back into history a little bit and revisit Mr. Hippocrates, the father of medicine? We're not going to mention Imhotep I because there's problem with Imhotep. The reason why we say that there's problem with Imhotep I is because he was the first to open the human body. If the human body was made to be open, it would have a zip on it. It doesn't have a zip on it. It was not made to be open. But we are going to overlook Mr. Imhotep I from Egypt in the first dynasty. We're going to skip over this man and we're going to go to Hippocrates. And maybe Hippocrates would shed light on what we are now expounding on. Hippocrates lived 365 years before Christ was born. This man cured every disease known to man. Hippocrates did. Long before Jesus was born, he was healing every disease. So when we say that only Jesus heals, no, we should say that only God heals. Because Hippocrates was here 300 years before Christ was born. But Hippocrates, like Jesus Christ, was obedient to the dictates of God Almighty. Hippocrates cured every disease by using what? Herbs or chemicals? We find that Mr. Hippocrates didn't use any chemicals because there weren't any at that time. He used only herbs. And at the time of Hippocrates, there were no such thing as aloe vera, comfrey, peppermint. There was already garlic. That was made by the Egyptian. But we know that by the Egyptian history, that those people were a little bit confused because they were a product also of hybridization and cross-pollination. Uneven yoke. History shows that the Egyptians were a crossbred of African, Persian, and Greek. that confuses things a little bit. You see, when things are complete, their molecular structure is complete, and they function in accordance with life. But when you interfere and bring three different vibrations together, that in itself shows us there is confusion. So Mr. Hippocrates obeyed the laws of life and the dictates of God. He cured every disease. Now the question should be asked, if I'm a physician that went through the discipline and took the Hippocratic oath, well, if I took the Hippocratic oath, I am supposed to follow the precepts of Hippocrates. But why are we using chemicals today? Oh, that went by, and understandably so. All these violations in reference to healing and nutrition is occurring now. We're not eating electric food. We are eating things that were made by man in a laboratory. Since Mr. Hippocrates showed the world that the herbs really work, that particular modality or philosophy perspective continued until the year of 1729 by Mr. Claudio Galeno. He is considered to be the last of the natural scientists, and that is a fact. Since this man, Galeno, the Italian, what we find ourselves now using are chemicals that are inorganic and carcinogenic. So, ladies and gentlemen, what went wrong? What could have happened that caused us to disconnect? Why have we continued to practice such inconsistencies? Well, there is something that we just found out in the last 15 or 20 years. There is a substance that has been fed to our people in and out of Africa and probably around the world, because I see it in Asia, not only in Africa. I see it in South America. I saw it in Brazil. I saw it in Suriname. I saw it in Guyana. I saw it all through Central America. What we are talking about is cyanide. Cyanide have a tendency to interfere with brain waves, vibration, or hormonal message. Cyanide interfere with the hypothalamus. Cyanide interfere with the pituitary gland. Cyanide interfere with the central nerve system. Something had to interfere, because we are continuing to violate that ecclesiastical mandate. The herbs are for the healing of the nations. And those of us that may have read that particular chapter in the Bible, or those chapters, we think that what we see today around us in the gardens and the fields, that these things, since they are herbs, well, God made them. They must be good. So I'm going to use aloe vera to cleanse your intestines. I'm going to use comfrey to strengthen your bones. But ladies and gentlemen, little did we know that comfrey was made just like aloe vera was made. They tell us that comfrey has calcium. It is called knit bone, consound, has many names. But they never tell us that comfrey is responsible for severe anemia. Yes, it may work efficiently, probably in one part of the body and affecting a whole lot others, like garlic. Garlic is a substance that would definitely lower your pressure because it would eat up the cholesterol in the arteries. But did they tell us that garlic, not only does it remove the plaque or the cholesterol, it eats the membrane because garlic is unstable. It is another product that was made by man through the process of hybridization and cross-pollination. Garlic is a poison. Garlic has an oxide known as the oxide of allyl. This is why when you put garlic on a knife and you cut someone, the wound would never heal. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are bringing forth the questions. We are asking the questions that were not asked, probably because of fear or whatever reason. But it is time. Disease is running rampant. And at the Usha Research Institute, we feel that if we have accomplished all of these things, such as the cure for AIDS, sickle cell blindness, and others, then naturally, we expect for the rest of the healers to converge on this particular modality or research. And it's not forthcoming, so humanity will suffer a little bit longer. So we want now for you to understand that we are separating that which is hybrid from that which is natural. And thank you very much, and we will come to the next segment. Now we'll enter this other zone, a zone that was of most importance. Yet our historian, our anthropologists, our archaeologists, our geneticists fail to bring forth and analyze and recognize, not to mention our ecclesiasticians. I could talk about my brother. My brother was a preacher for 30 years. He ate everything that God didn't make. And when he got sick, Pastor Gale took his body to the physicians. So we should ask the question, this man that preached the gospel for 30 years, once finding himself sick, elected and chose to turn his back on God and go to get a chemical that was made in a laboratory. We find that cyanide is so powerful. Cyanide would have you acting against yourself, not to mention the Creator. He has no place in life today. Because if the Creator had a place in our life today, as much as we would like for it to be, then most certainly we would not be drinking carrot juice and wheatgrass juice. We would not be eating a cow that was made by a laboratory. So there we find that violation is surmounting, right? A whole lot of it because of the cyanide. So we go back to the geneticists. Genetics plays a most important role. Why? Because when God made things, animals and plant, human beings, just name all species of living things. He placed the gorilla in Africa and the polar bear in Alaska. If you think that God made a mistake, all you have to do is to put each animal in the opposite environment that God made for it. Like the gorilla. Place him in Alaska. You will find that he would die with pneumonia in less than a fortnight. Place the polar bear in Africa. You would find that he would succumb to the heat. It's unbearable because his cells were not designed to live in an environment so hostile as the one in the Serengeti Plain, which is hot. Likewise, the gorilla would say that the environment of the polar bear is hostile to his cellular structure. And what about the food of the gorilla and the food of the polar bear? Where we find that the food of the gorilla are berries, plants, and leaves, fruits. The diet of the polar bear, on the other hand, is flesh and blood. If we believe, like we always does, we believe in philosophy. We believe in everything, but we never know anything. We just don't know anything. We believe in a whole lot of things. Like I always say that I prefer to deliver myself to God than to believe in God because there is uncertainty. The polar bear eats blood. Not so for the gorilla. Eats plant. But now we look at the behavior of these two animals. We find that the gorilla is a very pleasant animal. He has no enemies in the forest. He raises his offspring just like we do. Just like we do, he raises his offspring. He's a pleasant animal. Not so for the polar bear. This animal eats blood. He has to kill to live, because blood compels that animal to be vicious and savage, so he eats blood. We go to the birds. The eagle is a bird, so is a buzzard, and so is a hummingbird. That's a bird too. But the hummingbird, like the gorilla, he likes to indulge in the nectar of the plants. He has nothing to do with blood. He sucks the nectar from the plant. He's a very beautiful little bird. He's very gentle. Not so for the eagle. The eagle, on the other hand, eats blood, eats rats, eats snakes. But look at the disposition of the eagle and that of the polar bear, opposed to the hummingbird and the gorilla. We begin to see a biochemical interference. We apply that same example to the plants. Ladies and gentlemen, Many of you that are acquainted with plants, like the burdock, the yellow dock, those are only two, the Virginia snake root. Those of you that are not acquainted with the plants in the tropics, the demagagua, the kalawala, the cypress, these are powerful plants. These plants are responsible for us at the Usha Research Institute reversing these pathologies or diseases. So you find that these plants also does not live in an environment that is inconsistent with their cellular and genetical structure. You will never find kalawala grown in Canada, nor cypress, nor demagagua. That you will never find. Like you will never find the burdock in Central America, because these plants, the kalawala, the demagagua, and the cypress, are plant that grows in the tropical region of the planet. You will never find those plants in America. Likewise, you will never find yellow dock, burdock, or even the one shepherd purse in Central America, because the climatic condition is inconsistent with the existence of those plants. So as we take a very close look at plants and animals, we find that they have to obey a cosmic arrangement, a life procession that has maintained throughout creation. Does that apply to humans? The answer should be yes. When God placed each group, whether Eskimo, Chinese, Europeans, Native Americans, and Africans, we were placed in different geographical locations with a food that is consistent with the cellular structure that we represent. So in 1988, when the Usha Research Institute was litigated in the Supreme Court of New York because the ad read that AIDS and the rest of the diseases were cured, while being litigated, we asked the Supreme Court of New York, since God made specific food for specific gene group, when you remove the Africans from Africa, did you bring his food with him? The answer was no. We're brothers and sisters. If the food that God made for us was not brought with us when we were brought on those ships from Africa 500 years ago, what are we eating? What are we ingesting? And whatever we are ingesting, did our archaeologists, paleontologists, historians, or Egyptologists, did they take time out to ask about the food that would maintain my hormones, my central nervous system in perfect working condition? No, they didn't ask these questions. This was never even thought of. They went on to tell us about Plato, the philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, Diogenes, as if though that matters. The archaeologists were telling us about the various fossils that was found in Egypt 10 million years ago. The others, the historian, they talk about what took place in Africa so many hundreds of thousands of years ago. But never did one said that he found or that they found a food that is consistent with our cellular structure. And that is of most importance. You see, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, to understand healing, to understand health, one has to be very extremely careful, because each group depends on different food. So while they was talking to us and forcing us, I remember the conversation, oh, this group of people, they are dead. Black people are dead. No, black people are not dead. Black people are not ignorant. Black people has been misinformed. So since our food was not brought on those ships, we are eating something that offends our biology. And in offending our biology, it offends our thinking pattern. This is why we are vulnerable to the discretion of many. Yes, we are. You know, it's like putting gasoline in a diesel motor. It's not going to run. It just can't run. So, in placing the fuel that is improper for that engine, we find that there is problems. And what do you think is happening to us? Could we dialogue and make sense? It's difficult today. Cyanide has played such an important role in detouring that thinking pattern. And we have been so resistant that if we are told that Africa holds the secret to our health and our existence, we would quickly deny that there is a connection when deep down the Creator placed us in Africa with a food that is consistent with us. Now we find ourselves angry. Our children, very angry. They are born nervous. There is such thing as ADD, attention deficit disorder. There's also the undermining, the little untruths that we tell each others, the impatience, the love, that's been gone. Love is out the window. Because it would be impossible for us to love ourselves first while ingesting cyanide. It confuses thought pattern. It disarranges the central nervous system, and one finds himself very angry. I know, I experienced that. So what we did, after understanding that these things were not forthcoming, we decided to travel the world, once arriving at the understanding that when God does things, it should be respected. We went to Africa, Central and South America. We find the tropical plants, we put them together, and this is what we found. That there is only one disease, and that was said for the first time to the Supreme Court of New York in 1988, that there is only one disease. That one disease that is afflicting us is the basis for all manifestations of pathology. The mucous membrane has been compromised. Compromised by what? By an acid substance. You see, our body are alkali. the food should be alkali. Being that it is alkali, it is acid-free and it is electrical. You will never find a battery that says acid battery. No. If the battery has energy, it is alkali. So at the Usha Research Institute, we took the painstaking task of compounding these products that you know today as natural vegetation cell food, which assimilates immediately. Natural vegetation cell food, which will nourish the body and render the electricity that the body really needs to maintain that vibration, that vibrance, that energy, that livelihood, that sight, that life quality. Now that we find ourselves at this juncture, what do? Well, like I said, it is our duty. It is not the duty of the European race, the Chinese, the Eskimo, the Indian people from India. That was our responsibility. So this is why we put together a food for the blood. We call it Maya. That is our trademark. In that Maya, you find many, many herbs that addresses the blood plasma. We also, in the same therapeutical package, we put together a compound for the bones. We call it Focus. Focus is a compound with sea moss and bladderwrack. That was put together proportionally balanced to strengthen the calcium cells. We put together another compound for the central nerve system. We know that the central nerve system depends on what? The central nerve system depends on copper and carbon. Why? Because the brain is copper and carbon. It produces electricity. If you were to visit an electrical plant, whether in Nevada or in your automobile, just open your generator. The piece of equipment in your car that produces the electricity that lights your whole dashboard and your headlights. When you open that generator, all you find is a copper wheel that is turning and some carbon brush rubbing against it. The friction of copper and carbon produces electricity. That I was able to extrapolate from Mr. Benjamin Banneker. It was then that I realized that for me to adequately nourish the brain, I had to find those substances. And I could only find them in certain places of the planet. I find them in the King Keliba in Africa. I find them also in the Marula. I find them in the Popa. This is what we put together recently, is the African formula. The African formula has a tendency to change your life in a matter of minutes because it addresses every part of you. The other compound that we put together is a salve. This is a salve that has addressed many, many skin problems. Pain in a matter of minutes. Headaches in seconds on the skin. Carpal tunnel syndrome is properly addressed in a matter of minutes. Iron fluorine, like we before mentioned, iron is one of the most important mineral on the planet. And the reason for that is that iron is the only magnetic mineral on the planet. It attracts every other mineral to it. So when you ingest iron, you are ingesting every other mineral on the planet, and they are 102. This is why when people come to us that are severely anemic, we recommend our iron, our natural vegetation cell food, which is iron fluorine. Not only does it revitalize the cells in the blood, but we should know this, that iron is what conveys oxygen to the brain, and oxygen is what the brain converts and uses for electricity. It is the food of the brain. So you see that there are many things that need to be unraveled, because there seemed to be such a gross misconception. They brought us protein, they brought us enzymes, they brought us vitamins, they brought us melanin. But we have yet to accommodate these things in our human biology. They tell us. But then I started thinking that I stopped eating protein 39 years ago. Vitamins, I stopped them likewise 39 years ago. Enzymes, well, I never knew what was enzymes. I know many people think that they know. But like everything else, like this Dr. Lionel Paulin, he brought us vitamin C. What is vitamin C? Oh, I know what the answer would be. Vitamin C is good for your immune system. It strengthens the immune system. Not so. Vitamin C is ascorbic acid. The body has no place for acidity. The body is alkali. So you see, in the carbon papers that we are presenting, we are unraveling much of the misconceptions. And this is why we are privileged today, and for the past 28 years, to address all these major diseases in the way, in the manner in which they should have been addressed. But then another thing shows up, is that today, unlike yesterday, there were more love among us. And then we ask ourselves the question, why is it that the love that we would like to manifest, you know, to feel warm when we see another human being, to give that human being our love, the best that we have to offer, that is not forthcoming, not only to our own selves. We have turned against ourselves. First, because of the cyanide that has confounded these neurons in the brain. Cyanide. The other is that we have been listening to philosophy instead of God. And in so doing, we neglect ourselves. Once we have neglected ourselves and deprived ourselves because of this intervention of cyanide and philosophy, we find that we too become confused, and then it is difficult for us to give the love that we should give ourselves to others. It's not forthcoming because cyanide is interfering. We are looking outside of ourselves for the answer. Of course we are. We were trained to look outside of ourselves, but the answer was always within. So, myself, I was raised as a Christian, and I became a Muslim. I learned from both religions. Unlike many, they found a need to criticize one or the other. I criticize no one. I may question the philosophy of many, but not to criticize. Ladies and gentlemen, it gave me much pleasure to introduce today the first chapter in the carbon papers, And I assure you that if the things that we have expounded on are put into practice, yes, rewards will be seen immediately. And now, I thank you so very much. I love you. And we will always afford you our natural vegetation self-food. And I thank you so very much. Your brother, servant, Dr. Sebi.